And now we're joined by Ross Ulbricht's mother, Lynde Ulbricht, and she has the website freeross.org, where donations go 100% towards the appeals of his case. As we've said, he's doing a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She joins us, in fact, en route to visit him in prison. Start off by just telling us, how's he doing, Lynn?
Well, Ross is one of these very positive people by nature. And so from the very beginning, he's been intentionally positive, intentionally contributed to other inmates, led classes, helped them get their high school diploma, helped them get into college remotely. And he just tries to stay constructive and positive. So within the context of being in prison, which is very difficult, very hard, he's doing, as well as can be expected.
Okay.
Better than I would say most people might. He's really doing a good job.
All right, Lynn, just briefly, you believe he's innocent to some extent. Tell us what you mean. Obviously, from Nick's book and the court case, he was caught red-handed, logged in. The thumb drives had all the Bitcoins, a lot of chat and diary, all that point to his pretty heavy involvement. Tell us what you think.
Well, he was downloading the Colbert Report on an open source network in the library. He was not running Silk Road in the library. And I think that's important, and I've had crypto security people tell me it is, because open source networks, well, I know in this hotel I'm in now, I got a virtual private network because I know how easily it's invaded. There were much of the laptop protocol was not followed, and that was even testified to by a government agent at trial, that he did not follow the guidelines. And there's many questions about the laptop investigation, the ability to tamper with things, the laptop crash in the middle. So I'm very suspect of exactly what's on that laptop. I think that should be examined at least. I forget what else you said, but
right,
there are.
Let me ask you this:
Yeah.
It's obviously a tragic thing for your family. Everybody, including Nick Bilton, says this was a really sweet, kind kid. Big believer in liberty.
He doesn't know Ross, but yeah, it is true. He is
big libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
Did his ambition, his drive to change the world, run amok here? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of issues about fentanyl and more powerful drugs and overdoses and things like that resulted from trying to make drugs safer on this online platform. What happened to him?
Okay, first of all, he has said, and I believe, that his intention in coming up with this idea on the Internet was not to make drugs safer, although I think that's great if it did. Mm-hmm. He was all about a free market. Yes, he was a libertarian idealist in the Ron Paul campaign, got caught up and interested in, Austrian economics and voluntary interaction. So, yeah, an idealist in his 20s, mid-20s. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I think that, his idealism, like many young people, led him. As regards the overdoses that were mentioned, those came up not in trial, never proven. And, in fact, we had a forensic pathologist say you couldn't possibly even say they were from Silk Road. This was at the sentencing and actually helped prejudice the sentencing to give him life. And it wasn't even proven. And there's a lot of things in this trial and the sentencing that should concern us all, because really uncharged crimes, which was also part of it, mm-hmm. should not be part of our sentencing. Things are supposed to be brought to trial and put before a jury.
Yes, in
fact, and that was not happening. In some cases, the things that drove the sentence, and now, but even, and I don't believe it's all true, as I told you, even if it were, a double life sentence plus 40 years when there's all nonviolent charges with no prior record and no history of violence is a draconian sentence.
Yeah, in fact,
it's ridiculous.
It would seem to me that even if Ross was 100% guilty of everything he was said, the sentence is just brutal. You're working on a lot of big issues, in fact, through freeross.org. Yes. You talk about dangerous mm-hmm. precedents and Fourth Amendment searches that were too broad. What do you mean by dangerous precedents?
Well, there's been many precedents in this case that were, put us all in danger again. One of them is the use of digital evidence, which was almost 100% what they used against Ross. so easily tampered with, so easily deleted, changed, planted. And other courts have thrown it out. And this court said, no, it's all reliable. It's not reliable. And in fact, post-trial, the defense team discovered in the government's own evidence proof of tampering, where a big section that was very important had been deleted by someone who had access. And you can't prove it. I had a crypto expert tell me there's no fingerprints. There's no way to show that digital evidence has been changed. This lowers the standard of evidence. A mortgage company won't even take a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily tampered with it is. And yet this court used something that flimsy to put a man away for life. And there were so many questions. There were corrupt agents who had the run of the site for many months who were also crypto experts. One was working for the NSA, and they had all kinds of ability to change whatever they wanted. This is a big question, and yet he still gets this life sentence. It's to me frightening on many levels. And there's other things like you mentioned, the general warrants, and there were also unwarranted Pentrap and trace methods used without a warrant that should have a warrant. And these are all, things that can be argued, but with a general warrant, this was something that we fought the Revolutionary War for, basically, that you can't go into someone's house and rummage through it from attic to basement to see what you can find. And yet, in the digital age, they're saying they can do that with our digital houses, with our laptops or computers. And this is a big question for the digital age because the government is saying it's not protected. And there's a lot more data in our computers than there are in our houses at this point.
Do you think he was...
So that's a whole other question.
He was trying to make a point, obviously, that the drug war had failed. Do you think that he got his sentence in part took in other considerations like that, his libertarianism, other things that prosecutorial misconduct relating out of that?
Well, first of all, Ross said he started the site to have people experience a truly free market. There were some restrictions, by the way, things that the administration felt created victims, such as there was no child pornography. Mick Bilton mentions selling body parts. I don't think that was ever done. I don't know where that came from, but I assume if it did, it was voluntary. But in any case, there was no child pornography, no stolen property, no violent services. But otherwise, it's a pretty unregulated market, which I think is why so many drugs were sold, mostly marijuana. But in any case, Ross wasn't that interested in drugs. That's not wasn't his motivation. And I believe that. That's what he told me, and I believe that. He was a libertarian. He just wanted a free market, vendor and buyer driven, whatever people wanted to do. That was his ideal, and drugs were okay if that was a choice, but that wasn't the point of it.
And in fact, we're going to get into more detail on the issues you're working on through freeross.org. Where is his appeal status now, and what do you think the chances are that he'll ever get out of prison?
The appeal was denied in the Second Circuit in New York. Mm-hmm. Ross, by the way, has no connection to New York except that Chuck Schumer was behind this case, and the Southern District of New York wanted him there. He's from Texas. He was living in California, and he was arrested in California. But I'm told when the Southern District wants you, they have you there. So everything's been in New York. The judge herself owes her job to Chuck Schumer. He recommended her for her position with Obama. Pre Ferrara, who was the prosecutor, was Chuck Schumer's special counsel for a decade. And, Chuck Schumer called for this to happen. And so it's very political. And I think that's really the reason Ross got this sentence was the threat of Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency out of government control. I don't think it was about drugs because other drug offenders on Silk Road got a fraction of and they actually sold drugs, which Ross is not being accused of doing. The biggest drug dealer on Silk Road got 10 years, and it goes down from there. And the guy who was running Silk Road 2.0 and called himself Dread Pirate Roberts, the second iteration, he's free. He was released. So, it's like they've made him, Ross, taking the brunt of the whole thing. And that's not right.
Does he have does he have further appeals? I mean, is the Supreme Court the...
I'm sorry, I'm digressing. So, so they denied it. We have petitioned them to rehear it based on the fact, one big point is that the judge used Ross's libertarian political philosophy in the sentencing, to saying it was a dangerous philosophy, and that was one of the things that bolstered the life sentence, which is against the First Amendment. And also that the warrants were general warrants, and then the Pentraps didn't have a warrant. So it was saying, please reconsider. Basically, it's a petition saying to the Second Circuit, please reconsider based on this.
Okay,
now,
so
I'm told they very rarely do that. If they deny it, then the next step in the system is to petition the Supreme Court. Any of these things, it's hard. It gets steeper, very ability to make it happen.
Very hard, okay. And you've really devoted your life, obviously, to this. Lynde Olbricht, you can go to freeross.org if you'd like. You can make all 100% of the donations go towards his appeals. You can even use Bitcoins, ironically. And we're back, and our segment that we do for YouTube and for Yale Radio, which has non-commercial. Lyn Ulbricht, the mother of Ross Ulbricht, nicely agreed to stay with us. She is, in fact, as she mentioned, on her way to visit Ross in prison. Now, I want to get back to this sentence, which was very draconian. But did Ross make a fundamental mistake not to take a plea? He was offered 10 years to life, so there was risk in there. But he was charged with, narcotics trafficking, conspiracy, the kingpin statute, which comes with a death penalty.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Money laundering, the fake IDs, and some of those he admitted the fake IDs, for instance. And of course, he wasn't charged. He wasn't charged with. He wasn't charged with, but it was brought out about ordering these hits where he thought he'd actually had employees murdered who were not.
Yeah, well, no, that's very key. He was not charged with it. This is something they've said. This is not proven at all. So just please be clear on that. He was not charged.
He was not charged with that in court.
Because the government talks about no.
Yeah.
See, it's not been prosecuted. To be clear, there is still an indictment. It's almost 4 years old now, sitting in Maryland, and I expect them to drop it eventually. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's almost 4 years old, unprosecuted. But basically, no, it's never been prosecuted, proven, charged at trial, or before a jury at all. So to me, it's like...
You don't believe it happened? I mean, there were pictures of this Curtis Green guy who was an admin who he thought...
I don't believe it was Ross.
You don't believe that Ross authorized it?
No.
All right.
Actually, I've been told by people inside the whole thing they were involved, saying there was so much corruption. This was, by the way, based on the Maryland DHS office, which is where all the corruption was going on. Right. And these guys are in prison now.
Yes,
so we're supposed to take the word of these people that, it's like, okay, whatever. These guys are in prison, too.
Now, of course, they were stealing Bitcoins from Ross, is what they say. So
no, not Ross. They were stealing it from different accounts on Silk Road, different individuals, I believe.
So
don't know that it was Ross at all. It was, you're conflating Dread Pirate Roberts and Ross, and that's not necessarily, But anyway, it was not from one account of Dread Pirate Roberts. It was from different accounts, I believe.
Should he have taken the...
And there were other corrupt agents, I'm quite sure, because one of them, I think, deleted, or there's indication, and it was, I think I sent you articles, but anyway, that they deleted very important evidence.
Yeah, there were at least two. There were at least two corrupt.
At least probably
two
three,
corrupt agents. Should he have taken the plea, though?
Oh, well, when you're in the situation, you take your lawyer's advice, and the risk is when the prosecution was recommending life. So it wasn't like we'll recommend 10 years and hope the judge does it. They were recommending life. And you have no option to appeal if you take a plea. Mm-hmm. And that judge gave him life anyway. So at least he has, they're long shots, in the system, but at least you have a chance. But so it's a hard thing to look back and go, should we have? I don't think she would have given him 10 years. I think, I would have, if we knew if it was a plea for 10 years, yeah. But it wasn't. It wasn't.
Now, you've talked about a media lynching, and Nick Bilton, and that there were multiple DPRs, Dread Pirate Roberts. In fact, Nick claims he assumed that when he started that there were multiple, but that he's absolutely 100% convinced that it only could have been Ross. Well, talk about the media.
You know, Nick Bilton asked me on several occasions to be involved in the book.
Right.
He found me in front of the courthouse. He wrote me another letter, email, and I was considering it, but I was advised by someone who knows him and other people involved that they are going to be telling the government narrative, and that it wasn't a good idea because that, unless I wanted to be associated with the government's narrative. And I think that's what he did. I think he fictionalized the government's narrative, including the murder for hire, which of course was not charged or ever proven. And he writes about it as if it's real. And then I was told that he and people involved were given material by the government before trial, well before trial, and that this person actually saw the material. So the government was giving Nick Bilton information and material to use before trial.
Which you would call prosecutorial misconduct.
So I'm like, of course it's their version. Of course, and that's what he's relying on, plus the testimony I get, or Curtis Green and Carl Force and et cetera. Also, Ross's ex-girlfriend, who I know personally to be very self-serving. Her veracity is quite questionable. I've always thought that.
So you don't buy it when she said she saw him on Silk Road long after he'd claimed he'd stopped it.
Oh, I didn't read the book, so I didn't know she said that. I actually don't believe much that Julia says, and I didn't even before this. I mean, Julia is someone that I don't know. I don't. I mean, I don't. You
don't trust her? Okay.
I don't know.
Let me ask.
No, I don't. I have no reason to trust her. I have reason not to.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Looking at pure forensics now, there were apparently, if the book is correct, 2 million lines of chat, Ross's diary, and over 100 instances he put together from databases that show that Dread Pirate Roberts' movements and Ross's were the same, or that when they were on an airplane, say to the Dominica, Ross and Dread Pirate were signed off, and as soon as he landed, they could see that he was back on as Dread Pirate. Those kinds of things. The thumb drive was found by the bed, which means if somebody planted there, they were willing to give up tons of 170,000 bitcoins that were in there. Who would have set Ross up? And Nick just claims it would have been impossible to replicate 2 million lines of chat and diaries.
Well, I mean, I don't think you have to replicate every single line, but I think that who could have set him up is the person who was running Silk Road, and they were closing in on him. This was coming out in trial, and the judge shut it down. It was coming out that Mark Karpeles was being pursued by Jared Yergin for 2 years. He's the inventor of
Bitcoin, right? This Karpeles?
No. He had a Mt. Gox. They say that the inventor of Bitcoin is Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah, I mean that's what I meant. But he was one of the leading guys. Yeah, sorry.
He had a Bitcoin exchange called Mt. Gox, which he used to, I believe, steal people's Bitcoin, and it went down, and he's been in prison since. But the government agent, DHS agent Jared Yergin, was talking. It was coming out in trial that he had been on Silk Road as theorist for 2 years, thousands of hours, and he had probable cause to believe Mark Karpeles was Dread Pirate Roberts. He was closing in on him, and then Maryland, the corrupt agent, where the corrupt agents were operating, tipped Karpeles off that he was under investigation by seizing $2 million from his account. Karpeles' lawyers met with the DHS Maryland and offered them a deal. And they said, if you back off our client, we'll give you a name. And 2 weeks later, Ross was arrested. Now, Karpeles is a computer expert. He is also, it came out, and I don't know this for a fact. I'd have to give you information. But I was told that he had threatened murder, violence to people, that he could easily have hacked into a computer and set up Ross. I don't know. I think we know the tip of the iceberg in this whole case, and things keep coming out. And honestly, I don't know. I honestly don't feel that qualified to go into every little detail about the case itself.
All right. Let me ask you this. You
obviously, that
obviously...
all came out in trial, and then it was shut down. And I think that was wrong. I think the jury should have been able to hear all of that. Plus, the jury couldn't know about the corrupt agents either. And we don't know what they did. There's still undisclosed information and emails of them that hasn't come out.
When Ross, obviously when he's arrested, you guys must have been absolutely freaked out of your mind because you knew nothing about this. What did you think Ross was doing? I mean, even you've said that he wrote the initial platform and was the initial Dread Pirate Roberts, and then you say that he washed his hands when it blew up so big.
Well, Dread Pirate Roberts didn't come on the scene for a while.
What did you think he was doing though, in that period?
Oh, well, he was working on a Bitcoin exchange, and he had been trading currencies. He had Bitcoin. He had lots of Bitcoin because he had bought it when it was $1 or less. In fact, he told me about it. And I asked him if I should buy some, and he said, no, it's too volatile. And I'm like, oh, great, I wish I had,
Yeah, it was volatile,
It was, but it was only like $1 or less. He had a lot of Bitcoin. He was very much into it and creating a Bitcoin exchange, working on that. He also had a bookstore business.
Yes.
Excuse me. And different things that he was doing on the internet, and he was helping people invest and that sort of thing.
When you found out what Silk Road was and his free platform to, allow people to do whatever they want, were you offended that it was drugs?
Well, I certainly don't approve of drugs. I think that people shouldn't do drugs. I think they're dangerous. I don't think that there's an authority for the government to put people in jail for using drugs, or it's not in the Constitution. So I do understand the argument that, it's a choice. However, I don't approve of it. I also don't approve of, some things that are legal that are very destructive. But no, I would not want to be associated with, and I don't defend Silk Road. I mean, many of the things that are on there, I understand the philosophy behind it. And, but no, look, believe me, I wish it never existed. Yeah. I wish that, he hadn't been as idealistic as he was, but that's who he is. And that's the thing. He's really wants to be a good person and help people. And I think, if whatever happened, it got out of hand. It's not like he's somebody who you have to be afraid of, that you would have to be worried about would ever do it again, that intended to harm anyone. And this murder for hire is so uncharacteristic that it's just out there, very hard for me to. Yeah, I think don't believe it.
That's what I think. I get a feeling that this was a really good kid who let his ambition perhaps run amok off of his libertarian principles, and then didn't know how to stop it, and then got a sentence that was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think he got out because it was getting out of hand. But whatever, we could, you could argue that, we don't know. But, and I don't even think he was ambitious for money. He was living in he didn't own a car.
No, I think his ambition was.
Who, by the way,
I think was ambitious.
I knew him.
His ambition, I think, was to change the world. I think that was legitimate.
I just think
at some point, I just think at some point it overwhelmed even his moral compass.
Yeah,
because he was so focused on it. Let's talk a little bit.
Maybe so. That's possible.
Let's talk about freeross.org, these issues now, because these are what's obviously important to you. Tell me on this digital evidence, what is a pen trap?
Yeah, it gets kind of confusing, but there's a pen register, which monitors incoming calls, I believe, and a trap and trace device, which monitors outgoing calls.
Okay.
And it also monitors IP traffic now. And there's an argument really in the courts because it goes back to what's called the third-party doctrine, which is based on the dial telephone, which was ruled on by the Supreme Court in 1979. 4 decades ago, which says that the phone number, the argument was that the phone number is private, but they're saying no, because the phone company knew the phone number, it's not private. And so there's an argument about whether IP addresses are private or not. And the government's saying they did not need a warrant for this, but a lot of people say, no, we need a warrant because there's so much more information available now than with the dial telephone. is the whole. It needs to be looked at.
Interesting, and basically the search did seem almost unconstitutionally broad, and they were taking mail off of planes, right, without warrants and just opening it.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that was
I mean, the physical mail.
Yeah, they were taking physical mail because that's where it started. That they couldn't figure out where these drugs were coming in as little as one ecstasy pill, which was very unusual, and that's where they got the link to Silk Road. But they were actually just opening mail at O'Hare Airport, which seems a little bit.
Yeah, that was part of that DHS Chicago area.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that what happens in drug cases in general is that the Constitution takes a back seat because there's this drug exception, and it should be of concern because the drug war, I don't believe, is really about drugs. Because if it were, they'd stop after 45 years and over $1 trillion and think of something that might work. Because everybody's still using drugs, and but I think it is somewhat of a power grab and a moneymaker. And, of course, keeps the prisons full, et cetera. And so do these draconian sentences. So, but, yeah, Ross, I mean, there's actually a law, the Sentencing Reform Act, passed by Congress, says that a sentence should be sufficient but no longer than necessary. His sentence so far is sufficient. If Ross got out tomorrow, they'd never hear from him again. There would be I know that. I would bet my life on that. And he has learned a very hard lesson, and he realizes he was, a rebellious, idealistic kid. Uh-huh. But he learned. Now, he has no, the thing is, you can say, well, there was damage done. That's true of any kind of risk you take with drugs and that sort of thing. I mean, drug dealers of any kind. Mm-hmm. Not that he actually dealt them. And, but there's no place for restitution. There's no place for rehabilitation with a double life sentence without parole. It's just you're buried alive until you die, and we pay for it, millions of dollars.
And we're per person. We'd like to be a second chance society, right? It just seems like he seems like he would deserve, another shot, and certainly to have a life sentence. This transferred intent too, I think, implies because of the fact that Amazon hosts a website, right? So
exactly,
and they're not. Tell people what that means, transferred intent.
Yeah, or I think another term maybe more is vicarious liability. In other words, you are liable for what someone else does. So, for instance, there's a mother suing Amazon because her daughter bought cyanide off of Amazon, and she used it to kill herself. Exactly the same kind of situation. So it's proven that she got it off Amazon, and she's suing the vendor and Amazon. Now, why isn't Jeff Bezos being held liable for this? So it's the same principle, but he's not. They used it with Federal Express. They actually did criminally indict Federal Express for drug trafficking because people used it to move illegal pharmaceuticals. And Federal Express has very deep pockets, and they eventually dropped it. They have not sued, by the way, the U.S. Postal Service, and lots of people send it through there. But anyway, they did indict Federal Express. It's the same principle. It's very much expands the criminal liability umbrella. Now suddenly I'm responsible for what other people do. And of course, website hosts need to pay attention because not everybody has Jeff Bezos' wealth to insulate him. And you can be held responsible for what's on your site.
Do you think that the sentence that was issued was to send a message and basically not restricted to just Ross's case?
Well, they say it was, which to me was shocking because I thought, wait a minute, this is America. I thought we were individuals here. Mm-hmm. So they say it was, and because he used the internet in this way, he had this dangerous philosophy, and he was the first. And there is no law saying the first person gets the worst sentence. And in fact, the second person, who is now free, as I said, he knew what he was getting into. He knew what it was going to become. He was selling, I believe, according to Ars Technica, $8 million. I can't remember if it's a week or a month worth of drugs, a huge amount, and he's free. So I think it was political, and it is to send a message. He's like the head on the medieval spike in the castle. He's almost. This is what you're going to get.
Do you view him as a political prisoner almost?
Yes.
Libertarian?
Yes, I do. I don't think it's about the drugs because of the low sentences, like I said, of the other actual drug dealers. And actual drug dealers don't get life. Murderers don't always get life. Or kidnappers or torturers or people who bomb don't necessarily get life.
How often
and
are
to
you?
give him double life. Ridiculous.
How often are you able to visit Ross?
When he was in New York, where I live near there, and we could go once a week for an hour.
Okay.
And it was really a transitional facility. He was there, and he was able to continue to work on his appeal. Now he's been moved to Colorado, and we plan to move closer so that we can visit him. I think it's very important for him to be visited. I think it's very important, and so, especially because he doesn't have email like other prisoners, because it's an internet crime, and so they don't let you have email.
Oh.
And he's been put in a high security prison with violent people, even though his rating score is very low. It's like 7 or something, or 12. I don't know. I remember 7, I think, which is like you or I would get practically, as far as being a security risk and a danger. But because the sentence is so long, he's automatically put in this place. And he doesn't need to be in this place. He's not dangerous. He's not violent. So here he is, this nonviolent person placed in this facility, and I'm concerned. I worry about it.
Yeah, and is he out with all the prisoners, or he's not in solitary?
Yeah. No, thank God. That's awful. That's torture. No, he was in solitary for 6 weeks in the beginning, but he's not. He's in general population, and so he's here in Colorado, and you get a lot more visitation time because it's not a transitional facility. It's a regular prison, and so you get more time. So you get hours. Like I'll get to see him tomorrow for 5 hours, and the next day for 5 hours,
oh,
and
nice.
Over the weekend.
Obviously,
better.
Obviously, he was a highly intellectual guy, very curious guy. Yes.
Yes.
And how does he? And a very idealistic guy. How do all those things? How does he manage those things in prison, where it's just a boring existence?
It is boring. Well, he's studying artificial intelligence and physics with books he has. He's going to the law library. He loves nature. He's finally getting to go outside, which is a big plus, because in Manhattan he got up on a roof for an hour every few days. Now he gets out in a yard where he can see sunrises and mountains and run a track. And I don't know how safe the yard is, but he's out there, and he seems, he likes that a lot because he's very nature oriented.
He's not depressed.
And he also it's tough sometimes. Yeah. He has his moments where it is, but he also tries to keep a good attitude and be constructive. And like I say, he tutors, he helps out. This is new now, so I guess he'll see where he can do that. He did it a lot in New York. And, I had guards come up to me and say what a great guy he is and how wonderful and how, he doesn't belong there. I've had guards say that to me.
What do you think he sees or you see as his legacy will be? That he was a martyr, or that he was a young kid who made a big mistake and got screwed? What do you see as his legacy?
Both of those. I would like to see his legacy be someone who gets out of prison and gets to lead a free life and show that, there's justice. But I don't know. As a mother, I don't care about his legacy that much. I care about him as a person, and I want him to have a life. I think he'd be a great father. I think he'd be a wonderful family man, and I think he has something to give. I think he cares about people. He cares about his fellow inmates. He has a lot to give. He has great ideas, obviously, maybe too good sometimes, but he's matured a lot. He's 33 now. He was 26.
Yeah.
He's been sobered a great deal. And he's not stupid. He gets it.
How do you?
And so to waste him this way is so wrong.
Very honest of you.
And he's not the only one that it's happening to. By the way, this is happening in our criminal justice system. It's really out of control. And it's so many. There are 17,000 nonviolent people serving life in our country. Yeah, that's a lot of people. Nonviolent people who are not a threat to anyone.
Mass incarceration is all.
And then and then if you count the people who are serving virtual life, not strictly life, but like so many years, it might as well be. It's over 200,000 people.
How are you dealing? How are you dealing with the fact, Lynn, that right now the probability that he'll ever get out is very slim?
Well, I just can't give up hope. I really can't, because if I do, I'm too crushed. I can't. So I have to look, and I have to keep my hopes up. I have to think that there are, and I have to think maybe this can be used for good, that some of these precedents that need to be called attention to, that, look, no matter what you think of Ross or his case, these are important precedents, and they will trickle down from this high-profile case to other cases. And I have to hope that it'll be used for good, and so does Ross, and that maybe, the whole thing had to happen so that that can happen. But I cannot give up on the goal that Ross will be free. I can't. And so I just can't even afford to entertain that, because it's really too crushing for me. And this is hard enough.
Well, I have to say, you must be a tremendous source of support for him. And it's been an honor. It's been an honor having you on. And again,
thank you.
freeross.org is the website. You can go check out all the information, all the issues that they've raised. And if you want to help support his appeals, 100% of the money goes in that direction. And I want to thank...
Very expensive. Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah. And I want to thank Nick Bilton again and Lynde Olbrich for coming on board, giving us a great show. And we'll obviously follow this case. And thank our loyal listeners for staying with us. We'll see everybody next Sunday.